Hi there. Welcome to Coding Across the Curriculum, where I'm going to show you how to use coding in other areas of the curriculum. Today, we're going to be using Scratch to make a simple story. You could do this in writing to create your own story. You could use it as a response to something you've read, or even just to retell a story. You could tell a moment from history or current events, or you could use it to explain a concept that you've learned in any subject, for example, science, social sciences, or the arts. We'll be using three special sets of blocks to do this activity: the say and wait blocks, the move blocks, and the show, hide, and change background blocks. Before we begin though, we're going to talk about how to plan your video. If you want to skip to a different part of the video, because maybe some of it's too easy for you, click on the timestamps below in the description. There are a few things to consider before we even turn on a device or open Scratch. We must first think about who will be reading our story and what our story will be about. It's important to think about who will be reading our story so that we make it interesting or informative for them. We also want to think about whether or not it will be easy for them to use the program we make. Will the story run on its own, or will they need to interact with it? Once we have thought about that, it's time to plan it out. There are a lot of different ways you could plan a story, but today I'm going to look at storyboarding. You can find a template for making a storyboard in the description below. I've already spent some time making my own storyboard, so let's go to that now. As you can see, my story is going to be very simple. One character, portrayed by a stickman, is sad while another happens upon him. They talk for a little bit and discover they both like to play at the park, so they decide to go to the park. They walk away together and go to the park where the background will change. They'll have some fun at the park and then become best friends. It's not a very detailed story, but it's a start. Once you get some basics down, you can always add on to your story or make a more complicated one. Once we've planned the story, it's time to get on to Scratch. I'll show you how to use the blocks first. The two most important blocks that you need to use when you're doing a story in Scratch are the say blocks and the wait blocks. Many people forget to use the wait blocks. Remember that when you're having a conversation, it's important to listen or to wait for the other person to finish speaking. If I speak at the same time as my friends, it's all a jumble. For example, when I'm speaking with my friend Carolyn here, if we speak at the same time, you can't tell what either one of us is saying. Good morning, Carolyn. But if we wait and I listen to her first, then you can hear what we have to say.
Good morning, Mr. Davidson.
Good morning, Carolyn. The say block is found in the purple looks blocks. It's best to use the say for 2 seconds block so that the text doesn't stay there forever or for a lot longer time than you want it to. And you can control if you want it shorter or longer. If I click on the block, you'll see that the cat over here says hello. You can also use the think for 2 seconds block, and it will look like the cat is thinking. So instead of a speech bubble, it's a thought bubble. To find the yellow wait blocks, you go to the control block here and just pull in a wait block. And remember, you can change the time there to 1 second or any other second you want, as well as the time for the think and say blocks. The movement blocks will be quite important to our story, as we will probably want our characters to move during the story. It would be pretty boring if they stayed in the same place. You can find these blocks all under the blue motion heading. You can experiment with how each one works, but the two that we will need the most are the go-to block, which sets our characters at the beginning. We use it at the beginning of the story so that they start where we want them to, and the glide block, which is there. Now, just as an example, this says go to 0, 0, which is where the cat is right now. If I move that cat into the corner and I run this block, it goes back to where I want it to. The glide block is a better option than the move block because, unless your story involves teleportation, you can see every single step that the character makes. For example, if I ask Carolyn to move towards me and we use the move to block, this is what would happen. If I used the glide block, we would see every step that she took going back the other way. The last set of special blocks we'll be using are the show, hide, and switch backdrop blocks. These blocks will be important when we want to change scenes and some of our sprites are not in each scene. We will need to hide them or unhide them when the backdrop switches. You can find all of these blocks under the purple look section. We have show, we have hide, and we have switch backdrop. If I click on hide, the cat hides, and if I click on show, you can show the cat. Now we're ready to put our blocks together to make a simple story. We'll use the plan I made earlier and start with my two characters on either side of the screen. First, I'm going to pick my background. So I'm going to click on the backdrops and click on backdrops again and choose some from the library. The first one I'm going to use is the brick wall because that's where our story will start. And then I'm going to add another backdrop of the playground because that's where our story is going to end up. I'm going to delete the blank one because we don't need that. And let's start here with the brick wall. For my sprites, I'm going to pick Abby. Now this was meant to be a sad character, but as I looked through earlier, I couldn't really find a sad character. So we will just have to do with her. So let's put her over here where I want her to start. Let's delete our cat because that's not part of our story. And let's add a second sprite and let's just see if I can find, and it was going to be Devon. So I'm going to start Devon over here. Remember that it's really important that when you do this, you set your characters where they want to be at the beginning of the story. So let's start by coding Abby. Every program needs to start with an event block. So I'm going to use the green flag when the green flag clicked block. And like I said before, you need to make sure that she goes back to the beginning every time. So I'm going to go to X and Y, and that's the coordinates where she is. So whenever the story starts, if she does any moving, she'll go back there at the beginning when the flag is clicked. So the first thing she is going to do is she's going to say, not hello, but I'm very, very sad. And we're going to do that for 2 seconds. So the next thing we're going to get her to say is, it's a bit corny, but boo, hoo, hoo, for 2 seconds. So that's the beginning of our story. She says something. We want our second character, Devon, we want him to react to something. So we go to his coding, and we're going to start with when the flag clicked, and we also want to make sure that he goes to where he starts, and that's this place. So that's X at 170 and Y at -2. We want him to speak, but we also don't want him to speak before Abby is done, like we were mentioning before. So he's going to need to wait. So Abby talks for, let's just double check, 2 seconds and then 2 seconds. So that's going to be 4 seconds in total. Let's go to the control blocks and get Devon to wait for 4 seconds. We're going to get him to think now, because we want to show that he's thinking about what Abby's saying. So let's get him to think for 2 seconds and say, and we're lucky we don't need to change that there. Once we've had this little introduction, we want Devon now to kind of move over to Abby. So what we'll do is we know that at the story he's going to start there, so we'll say we want him here. And we'll use a glide block to have him glide over there. And 1 second to go from here to here might be quite quick. So let's give him 2 seconds to do that. Now that Devon is over here, we want him to say something again. So let's go back to the looks block and have him say, what's wrong? So for Abby to reply to this question, we know that she's already spent 2 and 2 seconds there, so 4 seconds. So that's the wait there. But she's also she has to wait for Devon to think, to glide for 2 seconds, and to say what's wrong for 2 seconds. So we need her to wait for a total, of 6 seconds. So let's have her wait for 6 seconds and give her reply, which is that I don't have any friends and nothing to do. So let's have Abby say, I don't have any friends to play with. So I'm going to continue this conversation on for a few more back and forths here before we take a pause
for you to work. Um, while I'm doing this, I want you to just kind of maybe pause the video and have a go at yourself.
Now it's your turn. See if you can make your sprites have a simple conversation. Pause the video while you work. It's really important when we are coding that we learn how to check and debug our programs as often as we can. We want to catch our mistakes early and fix them before we have too many lines of code to sift through. I'm going to run my code and see if everything lines up.
I want to make sure that my program works exactly how I figured it out in my head. In this program, there's really only one path the story can take, so we'll just start it and see what happens. See how the sprites talk at the same time? I need to go back into the code to see if my wait and speak blocks match up. You can see here that I accidentally made a mistake and only had Devin wait for 1 second instead of the 2 seconds that Abby was talking for. So a simple fix is just to go in and change the 2 seconds there. You will need to check your story now. If it doesn't work as planned, you will need to go back and look at your code to see if there are any mistakes. It may be just a case of a wrong number or a mix-up response, but it is essential that you check for this before you move on. So let's just look at this one last time.
In future videos, we'll have a look at debugging, which is where we find and fix our mistakes. Stop the video now and try your program. Does it do what you want it to do? Once we've got the beginning of our story to work, we might want to change in scenery. I'm going to show you how to make a second scene for your story.
We left off with our characters wanting to go to the park. So remember when we found the second backdrop earlier on, we're going to need to use some code soon to make that backdrop change. Before we do that though, I'm going to first add some blocks to show them moving off to the side of the screen. Right after that, then I will change the backdrop. So since we had Devin moving first, we'll have him actually glide slightly earlier than Abby will. We want him to glide to probably about here. Sorry, about to the edge of the screen. So let's do glide, and we'll do 2 seconds for gliding. And then let's have Abby wait. So let's have her wait actually a whole 0.5, half of a second later. So instead of 2 seconds after he talks, she'll wait 2.5 seconds. And then she will also glide to this point because we don't want her to glide on top of him. So let's have her go to, or glide 2 seconds to that point. And now remember, Devin is going to be half a second ahead, so we're going to have him wait 0.5 seconds. This is where we are going to have our change of backdrop. So I go to looks, and at this point, I will switch to atomic playground. Now, what's really important is if our story ends at the atom playground, we need to go and actually, at the beginning of the story, switch backdrop to the brick wall 1. So when it switches to the backdrop atom playground, that's interesting. I must have accidentally pressed the green flag button. We want both of our characters to hide. So they are both going to hide at that point. When we go to the playground, we're actually going to use a ball as well. So I'm going to get another sprite. Let's go for the basketball. And we don't want that basketball to appear until they switch backdrops. So we're going to put the ball there, and we're going to do when this clicked. and it's going to hide at the beginning because we won't be there, and it's going to have to wait. Now it will need to wait. Let's do some maths here. We've got 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and 20.5. So we want it to show after 20.5 seconds. So let's go wait 20.5 seconds, and let's do show. Now, once Abby and Devin hide, we want them to come to this side, and they're going to glide to where they want to be. So we'll have them first move or go to these two places. So there's Devin, there is Abby, and then we will have show. And then we will have another show there. Okay, so let's test that out to see what it looks like from the beginning. And there we go, they're at the park.
While I'm adding more to my story, why don't you pause the video and have a turn at changing the background of your story, hiding and showing some different sprites. Don't forget to test it and debug it if necessary before you return to me. There are a lot of things you can do to make your story more interesting. I'm going to show you 3. Adding sounds and interactivity to your story, broadcasting messages to simplify complicated coding, and using graphic effects. Feel free to add these if you want, but don't feel that you need to.
To make my story more interesting, I'm going to add some sounds and interactivity. To simplify the idea, I'm going to do both together. So when you press on a sprite, it makes a sound. You can modify this idea in any number of ways to either play sounds automatically without the interactivity, or to add interactivity to the characters. For example, making the story move forward when the user presses on a sprite or does some other action. I'm going to add a bell to my playground scene. When I put the bell on here, it's a bit bigger than I'd like it to be. So I'm going to go in and change the costumes and use the make the sprite smaller button. I'm going to place my bell right here in the corner. It's a bit hidden away, but that'll make it more fun for the user when they're trying to find out what to do next. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Sounds tab, and I'm going to click on bell toll is there, so that's pretty good. So I'm going to go to the coding bit. So in this case, we're going to use a when this sprite clicked block. And we are also going to use the sound block and play the sound bell toll so that when I click on the bell, it goes like that. But we only want this bell to show up during the playground scene. So if we remember from before, well, the basketball, we know from the basketball that it's 20.5 seconds until that part in the story. So I'm going to also make my bell hide at the beginning when the flag is clicked, and I'm going to make it wait for 20.5 seconds, and then I'm going to make it show it at that time. So let's give that a go and see what the story looks like right now. And so when I click on the bell, you can hear the sound. The next thing I'm going to do is to use this bell sound to move the story a bit further. I'm going to add a broadcast message block to the end of the script and call that message bell. The broadcast message blocks are in the events blocks, and as you can see there, it says broadcast message 1, but I'm going to make a new message called bell. So we can use this message to start a script in either of the other characters or both of them. And in this case, we're going to use both. So when we'll start a new script here, it says when I receive bell, we are going to get the characters to go do something. And in this case, we'll get them to leave the playground. So when the bell is received, obviously the sound will be going. So let's have Devin say, oh, time to get back to class. And then we're going to have him move maybe off to this side of the screen. So let's have him glide. And we want to make him kind of rush. So 1 second is great. And then we're going to have him hide. Now we also want Abby to go. So we'll have her, when she receives bell, she needs to wait for Devin to say what he needs to say. So she is going to wait for 2 seconds, and she is also going to disappear off to the other side. So we'll have her go this way. Also in 1 second, motion, 1 second to that point, and then we're going to have her hide because she's disappearing off the screen. The last thing I'll show you how to do is to use a graphic effect. There are several to choose from, so you can have a bit of a play later on. They're down here in this area: change color effect, fisheye, whirl, pixelate, mosaic, brightness, ghost. Have a play later on. Today I'm going to use the ghost one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another sprite. Let's go add this guy. And he's going to come on at the end of after the bell goes. So we want to do another when I receive bell, and we're going to wait until Devin leaves after 3 seconds after the bell goes. So let's have him appear about 5 seconds after the bell. So let's do control 5 seconds, and then we'll do show. The next thing we need to make sure is that at the beginning, when the story starts, that he is not there. So we want him to hide, and we want him to go from there. So we will make sure that he is at that position when the go starts. So the next thing we're going to get him to do is to slowly move to the center of the screen. So we'll have him go here, right beside the basketball. Glide 1 second to there. He needs to say, oh, how happy he is. Happy. I've got the playground to myself. So then we're going to look at this ghost effect. So not the color effect, we'll change it to ghost effect. And if we just do the ghost effect, we want to change it, and we'll maybe do that as well. We'll do change ghost effect. We want to set the color effect to 0. We want to set the ghost effect to 0. And we're going to do this. We want to do it over a slow period of time. So we're going to say repeat 20 times. And the ghost effect goes from 0 to 100. So if it's going to repeat 20 times, that means each time it needs to be 5. And inside the block, let's leave that for 0.2 seconds. So it'll do so over an amount of time. When we try this, let's see what happens. But we don't want him just to fade in and out. We want him to fade back. So what we're going to do also then is have him set the ghost effect to 0. and then we will do that whole block one more time. So let's duplicate that and put it there, and that can be the end of our story. Yeah, so have a play with those ghost effects and the other effects if you want to add those to your story. They do add a little bit of interest and intrigue to them, so I recommend trying them out at least.
Now it's your turn to add some things to your program if you'd like. Pause the video and have a try.
Here's my final story. It's not much, but if you can code something like this, you'll be able to make a much more interesting story of your own. Keep in mind that when I had my characters disappear at the end, I had to add these show blocks for Devon there and Abby here to make sure that they were visible when the story starts.
That's all for now. I hope you've learned something from this. Please check the description for links to some sample programs. You can also click on the timestamps to review any parts of the video you didn't quite get the first time. If you used this video to make any stories, please post a link in the comments. We'd love to see what you've made and it would help everyone else watching the video. If you liked what you saw, please click subscribe and watch our other videos, which will be coming soon. Bye!